humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 249, and I had a conversation with the legendary Alan Zweibel. Why is he legendary? The body of work this man has created, award-winning body of work, is mind-blowing. Really, it's enough for 4 people. He was an original writer for Saturday Night Live and created such iconic characters as the samurai for John Belushi. If you haven't seen the samurai sketches, they're fantastic. His close friend, Gilda Radner, may her memory be a blessing. I loved her so much. He and Gilda came up with Roseannadanna for one, and a host of other characters. But I would say that that's probably her most memorable character. Alan's won 5 Emmy Awards, the Tony Award, Writers Guild of America, Television Critic Association Awards. Like I said, he does everything. So he's authored over a dozen books, and he's won the Thurber Prize for his book, The Other Schulman. He has children's books. He just put out a book called Laugh Lines, My Life Making Funny People Funnier, which is his memoir over the past 4 decades of writing comedy. And he's close friends. You know, he was close friends with Gilda, and he's close friends with Billy Crystal and Lorne Michaels and Larry David, and of course, the departed and most wonderful Gary Shandling. In feature films, his credits include Dragnet, North, Gilda Live, and The Story of Us, which I personally loved The Story of Us. And it's so weird to me that I get to sit down and talk with him in this interview, because when I saw Story of Us, you know, I didn't. That was at a time when I didn't think about who wrote things. It's just so bizarre to end up one day. I mean, I really love that movie, and in fact, I did a monologue from that movie for an audition once. It's just a weird connection. Also, what's weird is, like I mentioned, Gilda Radner, whom I adored, she wrote a book when she was dying of cancer, and it's called It's Always Something. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. And Alan wrote the foreword in that book. It's weird when things connect like that in my brain. I love it. Bunny Bunny is a book that Alan wrote about his relationship with Gilda and their quips back and forth. It was really a fun read. And it also became a play. So an off-Broadway play called Bunny Bunny, Gilda Radner, a sort of love story. I loved this conversation because I like funny, smart people, and Alan is definitely that. We dig into his relationship with Gary Shandling. We talk a bit about Larry David. We talk about creativity. We talk about being funny. We talk about cancel culture, all sorts of stuff. He's got a movie coming out that he wrote with Billy Crystal called Here Today. It's based on his short story, The Prize. And Billy Crystal and Tiffany Haddish star in it. It's coming soon to hopefully a theater near you, but perhaps it'll be coming to a drive-in. You know, we'll see what happens with all that stuff. But definitely it's going to be good, I'm sure, because he's a funny man. He also, I should bring up too, so I brought up 700 Sundays. He's also the writer of Martin Short's Broadway hit Fame Becomes Me with Martin Short, obviously. And in all, I think 6 off-Broadway plays. I mean, when does he sleep? Who knows? I have a feeling he drinks a lot of coffee. So that is Alan wrapped up in a nutshell-ish. Can't wait for you to hear the episode. Usual stuff, social media, Hey Human Podcast can be found on Instagram and Facebook. You can find my personal social media under Susan Ruthism, and that would be Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. If you go to heyhumanpodcast.com, you'll find a links page with information and all that good news about my guests, and this one is no different. How to find Alan, his books, links to trailers for his movies and television shows, and that kind of thing. Also on heyhumanpodcast.com, you will find the store. You can get Hey Human merchandise, which is cool, I think. Definitely check that out. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you want to know more about me, go to susanruth.com. You can sign up for the mailing list there and check out some of the other things I do. If you like music, go to iTunes, search for me, Susan Ruth, and check out some of the music I have created into the world. I rewatched The Night Manager this week. So excellent. That's on, is it on Amazon? No, I can't remember if it's on Amazon or Netflix. I think it's Amazon. It's really good. It stars Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie, which then sent me down a Hugh Laurie kick, and I've been rewatching the first season of House, which is delightful. I like nerding out on that stuff. I love Hugh Laurie. I think he's so funny and a brilliant drama guy, too. Gotta love range. All right, no more of this parts. Let's get into that parts. Alan Zweibel. Thank you for listening, everybody. Take care of yourself. Be kind. And here we go. Hi.
Well, this must be a very big day for you. How are you?
It's huge.
You must be so beside yourself with glee.
I mean, it was all I could do, honestly.
How are you? It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm like everybody else. You know, you do what you do, and you adjust. I've got so much work to do that it's easy to lose myself in the characters and in the writing. And the next thing I know, it's 5:00. You know, hey, what are we gonna have for dinner? You know what I mean? And working out and doing, just trying to fill the time. How about you?
I mean, it's the same. I started working. I made my breakfast and I started working. And then 3 hours later, my roommate said, hey, you got food in the toaster.
Yeah.
Said, oh, yeah.
Well, I'll do that. I have this. I don't know if this started about a year ago. And my wife will tell me, you left the refrigerator door open, okay? And I go, oh, I did not. And then I'll look, and it's open. And I go, no, you opened it. Now when I'm alone, let's say, I'll walk back into the kitchen an hour after I was last there, and there's an open refrigerator door. So I guess I'm getting to that age where...
Like, you need the collar, the sensor collar, like cats and dogs wear when they get fed.
Something like that.
And you walk away, it starts beeping at you.
Yeah. I think that's the answer, because it's getting. And we've got 3 kids, 5 grandchildren, and
are they all there?
They're not here at the house, but our son lives about 40 minutes in one direction in Livingston, New Jersey, with his wife and 3 kids. Our middle child, our daughter, Lindsay, lives about 20 minutes from here in the other direction with her husband and 2 kids. And our youngest, Sari, just got engaged. They came to town, and they just got their negative COVID results. So my wife had oral surgery 2 days ago, and her poor girl, her mouth, her face is like this big, but they just went to go look for venues for the wedding. So, yeah, it's been really fun. Now, where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Where?
Los Feliz area.
Sure.
Yeah, very close to Griffith Park.
Oh, it's nice there. Yeah. When we started the Shandling show, the first year, ABC Prospect, is that down there?
Yeah, it's right around the corner from me. I walk past it on my walk every day.
So there you have it,
Yeah, they do a lot of filming there. It's been hopping.
Even now? I mean...
Even now, throughout the whole thing. They film, ironically, a lot of hospital and doctor shows there.
Oh, well, that works out beautifully. That's like... Because my friend Larry David had to shut down for a month with Curb. So... and much of his stuff is done outdoors, so I'm curious.
Trust me, I'm waiting on bated breath for the next season of Curb, for the next episodes to come out, because I've watched them all.
I've known Larry since 1974. I met he and Billy Crystal, who two of them today, to this very day, are my buddies. And trust me, in 1974, Larry David was no different then than he is now. He's the same guy. He had hair that was sort of like Brillo-ish,
Yeah.
But he's a good guy. He's a really good guy.
Every time that dings, an angel gets its wings. Is that your phone or your computer?
Now let me ask you a question. That must mean that an email came in. Every time I get an email come in, it dings.
Yeah.
Now I can lower the volume, but then I won't be able to hear you.
Right. We don't want to do that for sure. Because I say really important things, Alan.
Yeah. No. I'm writing them all down so I won't forget.
Yeah.
So, all right. I'm gonna click the little red dot that's at the top left, which I think takes me offline, and let's see if Zoom still works.
All right. Let's see what happens.
Here we are.
Oh my God.
Wait a second. Oh, this is a gift from heaven.
We may have just been sucked into an alternate universe. So just prepare yourself. When you go out after this, things may look completely different.
Well, you know something, I welcome the change at this point. Whatever it is, I'm there for it.
Well,
so now, how do you know Russ?
How do I know Russ? I met Russ on a street corner, like all good girls should. He was introduced to me through a mutual friend, and he had just finished writing the book about his dad. And when we were introduced, he pulled a postcard out of his pocket and said, "Oh, you should read my book." And I said, "Delightful. You should be on my show." He said, "Delightful." And we've been fast friends.
That's adorable. Yeah.
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 I love Russ. I love him. He's the dearest.
We met on an ill-fated show many, many years ago with Ryan O'Neal and Farrah Fawcett. And he had just come from, I guess, Murphy Brown. And I felt so badly for him because those years, Murphy Brown was at the top of the ratings list, and the show we were doing was like marching along so he plummeted, but he's immensely talented. And by the way, that show was in 92. So that's almost 30-ish years now. I don't know what Russ looks like. If you put him in a lineup, okay, I may be able to pick him out. I think I remember what he looked like back then in the writer's room and all of that. But I can't remember how we reconnected, but he sent me his book.
Yes.
I think I gave him a blurb. And we've been sort of in touch.
I've read all but one of his books. So this is what he used to look like.
Hold on.
When you knew him, probably.
Yeah.
And now he looks like that, only with a graying beard and longer hair, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I would say he looks close, just like you do.
Well, you know what it is? If it's not broken, why fix it? It seems to be working,
So that's only a man would say that.
Yeah, I understand. I understand totally.
In the entertainment industry, I think women are like, it's not broke, but let's fix it.
That's really funny. That's really funny. So you do this podcast, what, weekly?
Yes, it comes out every week, and it's one of several things I do. I don't know if you looked at my bio when I sent you all that info, but so I do this. I'm a writer, performer. I finished the conservatory at Second City, abstract painter.
Oh, yeah. I did read this. Yeah. Send me this stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, and a performing songwriter. So I've written songs for like Reba and Lone Star and a bunch of different folks.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you're having fun with your life?
I think so. This year has been challenging, as it has been for everyone, and most especially because I moved here about a year and a half ago, and so I'd only just really started the momentum of being in Los Angeles when
Yeah,
everything.
this happened, and everything came to a screeching halt. Where did you move from?
I lived in Nashville for 13 years, and before that, I grew up in Seattle for the most part.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. But so here we are. Thank you. I should introduce you to the people listening. Alan Zweibel, welcome to Hey Human.
Oh, thank you very much.
Welcome. But what I usually do, what I do is I do a preamble before the episode. You know, I go and I add in where I talk about all the fabulous things you've done, like the lifetime of Emmys and the Thurber and all your fancy titles and important things, so that I can use the bulk of this time to
For us.
Yeah, it's about you and me right now.
No, nobody else exists.
That's right. No one out there. That's the new world. It's just you and me.
It's just you and me.
We're on our own.
And let them fend for themselves. That's what I say.
We have a lot of books, and it looks like a good amount of artwork. Is that somebody punching a punching bag behind your head?
Yeah, this is a cartoon someone made when I was doing its Gary Shandling show, because it had been about 2 or 3 in the morning. And at one point, I made a remark that I was fighting sleep. And somebody did this cartoon of me punching a mattress. And the caption says, Alan Zweibel fighting sleep. And this is a picture of me and my old buddy Gilda.
I know. I love that. That's wonderful.
Okay, so that hangs there.
Growing up, she was one of my heroes. And really, it's still is.
Yeah, I mean, she was a big influence. You know, and there's a poster up there.
Oh, yeah.
Of a play that I wrote called Bunny.
Bunny, yeah.
It's about me and Gilda.
I have that book.
And I'm going to move you. Oh.
Where is it? Somewhere in here is Bunny. Oh, there it is. See?
Oh, God bless you. That's so sweet. Thank you.
Bunny.
And this is the sheet music to It's Gary Shandling Show, the song that
Which
Gary and I wrote.
You wrote in an elevator.
We wrote in an elevator, Mr. Shandling and I.
On the way to wherever you were going, you just wrote the theme song.
It was just magical. Like for me, as I say in the book, it was like lightning struck a second time. First with Gilda at SNL, and when I met Shandling, it was like, all right, I'm going to go through this again. And it felt really good. It was like all of a sudden, I had a brother, you know, and it was one of those magical relationships where, you know, we thought enough alike to want to write with each other. But I always feel that there's always about 10, 15% difference. And it's the alchemy of the two produces something that neither one of you could have done alone. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's, Gary and we did our show for 4 years.
Yeah, great show. And he is certainly missed in the world.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, I mean, Judd Apatow did that 2-part documentary for, I guess it was HBO. And it was also a memorial out in LA that I flew out with my wife to speak at. And everyone was telling at the memorial Gary jokes that Gary said, you know, and it was amazing because I spoke, Sarah Silverman, Bill Maher, Kevin Nealon, and everybody who got up and spoke had the same jokes. So I sat there and go, I can't do that one. I can't do that one. You know, because I went like 4th or 5th. So anybody who went before me, oh shit, I wanted to say that joke. But it was, yeah. And the thing about Gary was, in addition to his talent, which was huge, he was a mentor. There are a lot of young writers that will tell you that they learned how to write from Gary. And when we did It's Gary Shandling Show, I didn't really know the LA writers. I was from New York, you know, and so the only writers that I really brought to It's Gary Shandling Show were Tom Gamble and Max Pross, because I had known them from SNL and then Letterman. And so I brought them out there. Okay. And now, I mean, they've been huge for 30 years. They produced The Simpsons. But Gary knew the LA writing crowd. And so I would defer to him. You know, he hired a young guy named Ed Solomon, who's not only still a good friend, but he wrote Men in Black and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and Jeff Franklin, who created Full House and some other shows. And whoever he brought in, Gary was able to determine, he had this instinct as to a person's sensibility and how it would mesh with somebody else's at the writing table, in the writer's room. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But he would have these basketball games at his house on Sunday. And let's say it was called, he had a basketball court, and let's say the game was at 1:00, let's say. I'd get there 1:45, and there'd be a covey of young writers listening to Gary talking about writing. And then after the game was over, I'd leave and they reconvened. And I know myself, to this very day, when I'm writing something, there is a part of it. I got Gilda on one shoulder, I got Gary on the other, in terms of, more so Gary, because Gary was more of a pure writer. Okay, Gilda was an improv genius and all of that. Gary was a pure writer. He was a disc writer where he'd sit down and write. And I know that his influence lingers still. And I know that if you speak to Judd Apatow, if you speak to a bunch of others, they will tell you the same thing. You know?
I was very moved by that documentary. I saw some of the darkness that I carry, that many creatives carry. I saw that in Gary, and in his journal writing. And obviously he was next level because he had the childhood tragedy and such. But it is interesting to me how many people speak of feeling that brotherly bond to him, that thing that he sought.
You know what it is, Susan? Now, am you Susan or Sue?
Susan.
So if I said Sue,
well, I'd shut the computer.
You throw me out of here. The thing with Gary was he had with all of his demons, and trust me, he cornered the market, okay, on demons. He had so much tragedy in his life, and so many, he lost a brother at an early age. His dad had died. He was in a near fatal car accident himself. He was very spiritual. So along with whatever, he was so fucked up when it came to living inside of his own body. He was uncomfortable. And I remember there was a 40th birthday party that he had, and his shrink was there. Her name was Lou. I don't know what that was short for, but his shrink's name was Lou. And I went up to her and I just went, "Good job." But he, with everything, which was the, I guess, where his humor lied, in reconciling those things, and sort of an outsider trying to fit in, and his view of the world. There was a spiritual core there. And when I first met him, he was the first person I ever knew who was into crystals. This was before it became a thing. He had a cabin up in Big Bear where he used to go and just meditate for a weekend and come back refreshed. He's given me, he gave me books that are on my somewhere on the shelves over there, that a few of them had God in the title. And when it came to writing, it may have been in Judd's documentary, but he used to say it all the time, he would use expressions that people didn't use then. Okay, now it's part of like the jargon, but he would say, when you're writing a script, you write from the core. who your character is, what's the story, get it down. The jokes will come later. But what's the inner life of the character? Where do they really live? What is this about? And it was an approach to writing. I know for me, coming from SNL, which was sketch and joke, I really didn't have to plumb those depths until I met Gary. And as a result of his influence, everything that I've written since then has had a certain amount of heart. It was, this was the story, but it was also about something else. And I think at this point, I do it subconsciously, but it was something that was verbalized by Gary. And I think, when I wrote my book, Laugh Lines, I interviewed a lot of the writers from It's Gary Shandling Show and mutual friends that he had written with, because I wanted to make sure I got the story straight and all of that. Everybody said the same exact thing about him when it came to writing, about what his influence was. And that was a gift that he gave.
Yeah, I often wonder, people who do feel uncomfortable in the meat suit, as it were, and who have been visited upon by tragedy after tragedy, that they see deeper into other people because they're seeking themselves. They're trying to figure out who they are by who everyone else is, and it allows them a deeper plumbing mechanism, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I never looked at it that way, but I think you're right. I think that what Gary used to do, and it used to spook some people out, he would look at you as if he was looking through you. And there are people like that. The eye contact is one thing, but taking an X-ray is another. And now that you put it that way, I think that there was a great degree of self-wandering, self-discovery, self-examination. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Well, let's get into you, shall we, and examine you deeply, so to speak.
Sure.
Let me put this glove on. We'll be good. You began writing jokes for Catskill Comics, and you can learn that about you through a billion different interviews and reading Laugh Lines, which I loved, by the way. I've read Laugh Lines, Lunatics, Bunny. And you wrote a movie that I loved, and we talked about this in our email, is Story of Us, which that movie, whoo, boy, howdy, talk about getting to the heartstrings.
Well, I started writing that movie alone. One day I was driving with Rob Radner, and I guess I'd just had a fight with my wife or something. And I just said, if Robin and I ever separate, I think we should do it over a summer when the kids go away to camp. So they won't know. And hopefully Robin and I can get it together during those 8 weeks. And then Rob said, yeah, but what about visiting day? Well, we would put on a little act and make believe everything was hunky-dory when we fly out for visiting day halfway through the summer. And we said, okay, he said, let's do that. And I worked for 2 years on this script, and I didn't want there to be a seminal moment where two people, somebody was having an affair and that's why they broke up, or I wanted to make it the wear and tear of the job, and the subtitle was, was The Story of Us, Can a Marriage Survive 15 Years of Marriage? Okay. So it was the slow erosion of the day-to-day stuff. And after working on the script by myself, and I didn't want to have a black hat and a white hat. I didn't want one person to be, right, and the other one to be wrong. After close to 2 years, every draft I wrote, the guy was an angel, and the wife was such a bitch.
Oopsie.
And I said, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. So I went to a birthday party. Robin and I went to a birthday party. Larry David's 50th birthday party. It was at a restaurant. And across from us was seated Jesse Nelson, who's a writer-director, She had at that point wrote and directed Corinna. She has since wrote the book for Waitress, the musical, and she created a TV series called Little Voice about Sarah Bareilles on, I guess it was Apple TV. She and her husband, Brian Gordon, who's this wonderful director, was seated across from us, and I hadn't really met them. And I saw him say something to her. I had no idea what the words were because they were across the table. There was noise. And you'll be able to see it, but your listeners won't be able to. Her reaction to whatever he said was, so she just scrunched up her face and, like he was an idiot. And I recognize that face because that's the one I always see when I say certain things to my wife. So on the way out of the restaurant, I introduced myself to Jesse. I said, listen, you really don't know me, but how do you feel about writing a movie where you spill your guts out and all the secrets about your marriage to be seen in front of millions of people? So we took her marriage and my marriage and blended them. And then when Rob Reiner said he was going to direct it, then his marriage came in, so it became an amalgam.
Yeah, when I saw the movie for the first time, and I told you that monologue that Michelle Pfeiffer does about wanting to go to Chow Funds, and I remember watching that thinking, that's where it all is right there. The fact that, this length and depth of a relationship, it has its ups and downs, but you know what you're getting. That little face somebody makes. Or I just love that scene so much. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, that speech by and large was written by Jesse and maybe Rob too. I was out of town. Bunny was in rehearsal to come to New York. So I had to leave LA. We were living out there. I had to leave there for a couple of days. So I remember coming back and them handing me that speech, asking me to add to it and to edit it. But I must give credit that the whole thing about civilizations built on different civilizations, and and reading Winnie the Pooh and all of that. I think that was Jesse. That's where, and to this day, she's a good pal because there's certain people that you connect on certain levels with.
Yeah, it was a cool movie. So when you started out, and you, in your book, you talk about how your parents wanted you to go to law school, and you tried all that, and it's very funny. I don't want to give away the joke, so everyone must read Laugh Lines. It's so good. But when you started writing for the Catskill comics, was it that thing where you thought, yes, I know I'm funny, they'll figure it out? Or was it a holding your breath until you started realizing that people are going to pay you for your jokes and that they were landing?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because being funny in front of your family, making your friends laugh because they already know who you are, that's one thing, and it's like if somebody knows you, you don't have to say a joke for them to laugh because it's an expression of your character that they know you by. But to write material for another person to deliver with hopes that strangers will find it funny, that's scary. I was nervous about that. I would write jokes. I would send it to them. There was no emails at the time, so I would mail them. And I would go with them to any of the Catskill Mountain hotels, and I'd sit in the back of a nightclub Friday night, Saturday night for whatever show, and I'd wait for my jokes to be told. And I would sit there and I would be nervous. I'd be nervous about two things. I'd be nervous that did the audience laugh? But just as much, I'm going, don't fuck it up. Just say it the way I wrote it, right? Give it its fair shot. You know what I mean? Don't mix the words around. Don't give it. All right. So there was that. And I think every writer, even when, you write for Broadway, you write for the movies, you write for anything, you have a voice in your head and you know how you think a line or a speech or whatever should be delivered, and you just hope that it's done that way. And then if it has to be changed, at least it had a fair shot, you know?
Well, you bring up a good point about the voice. So you have a voice, obviously, when you're writing. It comes up in your books and in the jokes you write. But when you're writing for other people, how do you make that? How do you keep some of yourself and that comfort in there? Or do you let go of that completely, the ego of it all, and jump right in and just say, what is this person? Who are they? How is their voice?
The ego of it has to be put aside, okay? Because when you're writing for other people, the characters, okay? Let's say it's a play, because I haven't written jokes for a stand-up since I got the job in SNL. So that's since 1975. I don't do that anymore. But when I write scripts, or when I co-wrote 700 Sundays for my friend Billy Crystal, it had to be Billy's voice. It would have been illegitimate if it was. Now, we have a similar sense of humor, but his voice, it has to sound authentic. It has to sound like the person you're writing for wrote it. And so there can't be an ego involved. Now, if in fact you believe in something that the person you're writing for doesn't have the same faith, then the next discussion is, okay, maybe you don't like that line, maybe you don't like that speech, but here was the intent. If you agree with the intent, let's figure out a better way that you're more comfortable saying it. Because you can't impose yourself on anybody you're writing for or any character you're writing for, because it will be fraudulent. And if an actor doesn't want to say a line, and you can try to convince he or her as much as you want, if they don't have conviction, it's not going to land. They're not going to say it. It's got to sound natural.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking, since I knew I was going to be talking with you, I started thinking about Rodney Dangerfield and his "I get no respect," and thinking, God, isn't it interesting to think you change a couple words around, no one respects me. It just doesn't do the same thing. Why? It's interesting. It's fascinating to me.
Well, I think that he was aided, and I wrote for him back then, and he was easy to write for because he was a character on stage. He had a persona. He wasn't like those other Catskill comedians who were just joke tellers, okay, who just delivered jokes. And it was those people, yeah, they might have scored heavy with an audience while they were still on stage and taken their bow. Trust me, on the way home, in the car, the couples would forget who that guy was. There was nothing that stuck, okay? Rodney looked the part. No, he was just a stand-up, and he had that look. He had those big eyes. He had that twitch thing where he put his hand, near his tie, and you're absolutely right. If he said nobody respects me, it wouldn't have mattered. But there was something about the character that I don't get no respect. Yeah, that's the way that guy would talk. And if you go on YouTube and it's so refreshing in this day and age in comedy to see somebody go on television and inside of 8 minutes tell 100 jokes, just one right after another. And it's, look, I love storytelling. I love Woody Allen telling a really long story and peppering it with jokes in it. There are certain, John Mulaney does that. There's a guy named Mike Birbiglia. They're storytellers, and that they supplement the story with these great jokes. Rodney, it was just like a machine gun, joke after joke after joke, but it was that guy telling it, and you bought into the character, And he took you for a ride. You know, there were a couple of people like that. Stephen Wright used to tell 1,000 jokes. No, you know, he didn't have Rodney's energy. So there was something.
The best delivery. His delivery of stuff was so great and dry and wonderful.
No, he would say, you know, it's a small world, but I wouldn't want to have to paint it.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. And and it was so droll and, you know, this monotone thing. You just buy into it.
Yeah, his rock collection over all the beaches in the world that he gets is so good. Yeah, he's Mike Birbiglia is fantastic. He's got My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, I think it is called.
Yeah,
that's such a good one. He's so
and
funny.
He's got a new one called The New Show, which is about having a kid.
Yes, that's a good one too. Yeah.
And he does this brilliant thing. He somewhere in the beginning, and I haven't seen it in years, okay? So I might get some of this wrong, but I remember because I saw it in a lot of stages while he was working on it before he brought it to New York. So I saw different incarnations of it. But he would start off as a single guy talking about his relationship with his couch, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he gets married. Now he's got a kid. And he talks about how the relationship with the couch has changed because, you know, diapers are changed on it's not his couch anymore. You share it. But when he told it at the beginning, the couch stuff, it was very funny, but you didn't think you were going to hear about the couch again. And now 20 minutes later, he's back at the couch and he's talking about the changed relationship. I just marveled at that. Mulaney does the same thing.
Yeah, it's quite lovely. They're epic talents. You told a story that I heard that was hilarious about getting kicked out of Hebrew school for falling in love with Sarah.
Oh God, I forgot about that. Yeah, we learned in Hebrew school that Abraham was married to Sarah. She was childless and until she was like 90. And she gave birth to Isaac. And I had this crush on Sarah. I figured that the competition was probably not that keen. You know, she was 90. And I was caught by, back then, this was on Long Island. And you understand, I see, how old must I have been? It was in the early 60s when I was, how do I say this, just discovering myself, if you will. Rabbi Levitats caught me playing with myself while thinking about Sarah.
I love that so much. You know what? I think Sarah would be proud.
It's got, look, in the very least, it's a compliment. You know, if she doesn't like me, fine. Okay. Have it your way, Sarah. But she has to feel good about that.
I mean, God, if I've got young boys, anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you went to meet with Lorne Michaels for the first time, so you wrote on SNL in the first 5 years of its incarnation, this epic cast, legendary cast. I love that you put on a crazy suit to do it. And I don't want to give too much away about that either, but I want to know.
Oh, you mean for my interview? Yeah.
For the interview. And I've got to wonder, did you have, I mean, I know that you knew the people that were going to be involved, but was there an inkling of what massive thing was about to transpire?
No, there couldn't. Look, if anybody from back then told you that they had a feeling that they would be in the middle of their 46th season now, I would say, no. That didn't happen. If they tell you that, they're lying. All I knew was the reason that I didn't want to write for those Catskill guys anymore is because it was like writing for my mom and dad's generation, okay? We were their children. We were the baby boomers, okay? And so I didn't want to write wife jokes. I didn't want to write, those kind of, paving the driveway or whatever that was. Woodstock had happened a few years earlier. Nixon resigned. There was Watergate. There was, the pill. There was a whole new social structure. And that's where that was what I was a part of, and I wanted to write for there. So when I got the opportunity to audition for Lorne for this new show, which would be targeted for that generation, my generation, okay? I went, yeah, this is what I want to do. I didn't know Gilda. I didn't know Belushi. I had heard their names around town, but mostly when I heard that they had been hired. Oh, yeah, but who's this guy Belushi who's just hired? John, I had not seen before. There was the National Lampoon had a show that Gilda was in. I want to say Harold Ramis, Bill Murray. Look at these people. And that I went to go see. I didn't meet any of them, but I knew that this was the new humor, so to speak, at that time. And when I got there, when I got the job, it was the greatest day of my life. My dad manufactured jewelry in New York, and his place was on 52nd between Madison and Fifth Avenue, and I would make deliveries for him, after school or whatever, and wherever the package had to go, no matter where, I made sure I went by way of Rockefeller Center. It was then called the RCA building. It's now the Comcast building, 30 Rock. Johnny Carson had the Tonight Show from that building, and in the mid-'60s, there was a show called That Was the Week That Was. There were people upstairs doing what I wanted to do someday. And when I got the job and I reported to that same building the first day as a TV comedy writer, it was, to me, it was miraculous. It was the greatest day in the world. But I had no idea. I knew it was different. I knew it would be different. Back in the 70s, if you watch variety television shows, there was Sonny and Cher, and Rich Little had a show, and Flip Wilson had a show, Jim Nabors had a show, Carol Burnett. I would hear audience laughing, and I couldn't figure out why. To me, that wasn't funny. Why would anybody laugh at that? And when I met this group of actors, Lorraine Newman and Gilda and Belushi and Aykroyd, they made me laugh. And that was what I bargained for. That's what I wanted to do. Put words in the mouths of people who made other people laugh, saying the same kind of things that I would say, feeling the same way that I do. So that was, yeah.
There must have been an excitement too, to once you were in there and starting to write, to realize the fearlessness, the willingness to do anything for the joke or the moment or the feeling or the zeitgeist. What was that to write to that? Because now you look at things and people are so afraid of being canceled, so they're not saying things. They're still, if you take SNL for an example, I think Kay McKinnon is certainly fearless. Will Ferrell, fearless. Eddie Murphy was fearless. There's like so many of them along the way, but that group just balls out.
Well, you look at it this way too, Susan. Look at the landscape back then. There was no cable. There wasn't even Fox. There was 3 networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. That was television. And you had this group of actors and you had this group of writers. You look at the original writing staff. Michael O'Donoghue had founded the National Lampoon, and Beats wrote for the National Lampoon, okay? Tom Schiller did documentaries. When we had our first, Franken and Davis were this really left of center offbeat comedy team. And when we had our first meeting, Lorne described the show as a comedy variety show. but he went one step further, meaning he elaborated, saying it's a variety of different forms of comedy. Okay. So it didn't have a single voice. It had the voices of the writers. It had the voices of the actors. The show, the amalgam, yeah, it fell under the same roof. That's a Saturday Night Live kind of thing. Okay. So there would be the outrageous stuff. You know, all the Franco is still dead jokes and whatever else we did back then. But then Marilyn Miller, who was one of the writers, she would write some really soft pieces that Lorne would put on at 10 to 1 in the morning, but they pulled heartstrings. They were softer. So it was different sensibilities. And it was exciting. And look, the fact that it was live and the fact that it was so bold, it was a high wire act. You know what I mean? If you failed, you felt like a schmuck, but Monday you can start redeeming yourself because you had another show coming that Saturday. And if something you wrote really scored, you felt great about it, but you couldn't strut too much because Monday you had to start a new thing.
Did you not sleep for 5 years?
I did not sleep for 5 years. Not only did I not sleep, the show is written on Tuesday nights, at least when I was there, because the read-through is on Wednesday. And that's when everybody, the writers, the actors, the producers, the set designers, the wardrobe people, everybody hears the scripts because they have to know what costumes to design and what sets to build and lighting and whatever. So the scripts have to be done by whatever the time is designated on Wednesday for the read through. And it got to, at least when I was there, Tuesday, you got there, whatever time you got to the office Tuesday, you knew you weren't going to go home till Wednesday night. Okay. It was like that. And it was, there was something about the fact that it was such an adrenaline rush that even after I left the show in 1980, my body was programmed to stay up all night Tuesday night, and I had nothing to do. I was home. I was married to Robin. I think she was pregnant at this point, but there was no reason. But Gilda also, she would call me at like at 3 a.m. She says, "You still up?" Yeah, I can't go to sleep. It was like our bodies were conditioned.
Yeah, Gilda, she to me personifies so much about comedic genius, especially in the feminine form, because she was fearless. Absolutely. I know I used that word before, but to me, she was absolutely fearless, and she wanted to pull that laugh out of you so much. It becomes almost an obsession, I think, for some of these actors.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Belushi was the same way too. In the case of Gilda, look, all of them were great. Lorraine, I'm nuts about, and Aykroyd was a genius on that.
Oh yeah, they were all perfect.
Yeah, they were. But with Gilda, what she had was this very rare quality. Not only did she want to make you laugh, because as a kid, she lost her dad at an early age. She was overweight, and her comedy was her way of getting acceptance, her way of being hugged, but she also had this quality where, if anybody ever asked me, which has been asked a number of times, what her bravest quality was, I would say that it was that she was brave enough to show her vulnerability. She was brave enough to let you know what made her feel scared, and you got to know her that way. So when she would do Roseannadanna, it was really funny. Yet she had the wig, she had the dialect, and whatever we wrote was funny. But there was another level going on. It was Gilda doing it. You felt you knew who the person was. And so that's there's an intangible kind of quality that, there are a lot of people who do characters. There are a lot of people who are real funny, but they're technicians. You don't know who they are. You know what I mean? Even when they impersonate. You can get certain people who can do great impersonations, but other people can do impersonations. Yeah, they sound like that person, but you feel you know the person who's doing it. I mean, Dan Aykroyd back in those days would impersonate, let's say, Jimmy Carter, and Danny had a mustache. Jimmy Carter didn't. It didn't matter. You know, Danny would there was a talk show host named Tom Snyder who did not have a mustache. But Danny did it so well that there was another thing going on. You know what I mean? And that's that goes beyond talent. There's a component of the personality that allows itself to be seen. It's not covered by the comedy. It expresses it, and you know who's doing it. It's
a rawness to it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's no slickness. There's no polish. You know, there's no anything that, you know, like I said, those other variety shows that were on when I was growing up, the women wore Bob Mackie gowns. The men wore tuxedos, and they would do, you know what I mean? And then we had Belushi, you know, with his belly hanging out of the bottom of a tie-dye T-shirt. You know, it was different. There was an authenticity to it.
Yeah, I got the sense when I read Bunny Bunny and when I read Laugh Lines as well, the emotional intelligence of Gilda Radner, that it shaped you so much. But you allowed for that. You were like, the pebble floating down the river, and she was the water going by.
Yeah, absolutely. I went for a ride, and we always used to say that I brought out the guy in her, and she brought out the girl in me. You know, and there was something true about it, because she was, in her fearlessness, she would also bang against walls and, you know, and fall down, pop up. And there was a lot of physicality there. Okay. And I would write those things for her. But when we wrote together, I'd also look for the heart, you know, so that we filled each other's voids that particular way. And once again, it was the same thing with Shandling, you know, and, you know, I've been real lucky with these collaborations. They're different because they're different people, but whether it's Billy Crisp, Martin Short, I write a lot now with Dave Barry. It's the same. It's different, just like each couple is different, okay? But the mechanisms are pretty much the same. It's just, okay, so you adjust this way, you adjust that way, so it meshes somehow.
When people like Gilda or John or Gary, these immortals, pass away, or Robin Williams for that matter, these people that meant something so deeply to us in our heart, you know, that humor, because the world can be a shit show, let's be honest, and to turn to someone that can make you laugh and also has a look in their eye like they're saying, I know you're in pain because I'm in pain, but we're going to get through this together. All those people to me had that quality. So when they pass away and they're an immortal, how to mourn somebody like that versus mourning a regular celebrity. How do you do that? I mean, your whole life has been on that roller coaster between pain and laughter. It feels like the things you write and the people you've surrounded yourself with.
These are wonderful questions, Susan. I'm gonna show you something. Your audience won't be able to see it. Okay? Can I get up for 2 seconds?
Of course.
I'm gonna show you something.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is a picture that only I have. This was not a publicity photo. It was from, I don't even know if I took it, but I'm the only one who has it, okay? Now, if you can see Gilda's expression.
Yes.
Okay, when I sit here and I work, I look at my bookshelf over there, and I look at this picture, and to me, it makes me smile, and it makes me think that, all right, we can't take things that seriously. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it's like any relationship with any friend, any relative, a grandparent, a pet, what's the takeaway? You know, why do we have certain friends? Okay, we have certain friends because they make us feel good. They make us, we love them, but in addition to loving them we know how they feel about things, and it touches our heart one way or another. I'm looking around the office here as we're speaking. I've been very lucky. You know, one of my best friends is Rob Reiner. Now, he hosted the third Saturday Night Live ever. He directed a few movies that I wrote and we did together. And we're working on developing a TV series together now, 45-ish years later. And the reason I bring it up, or any of these people that I've worked with, we're friends. Lorne Michaels used to have an expression where he says, you know, you want to work with someone that you want to have dinner with afterwards, you know, and it's very true. You know, and what we do, the joke telling, the joke writing, is very much soul bearing. And when you do that, you expose yourself. And if it's accepted, well, that's friendship. And it goes deep, you know. So when that person passes, you can't share it with them anymore, but you can still keep them alive. What did you glean from the relationship? What's lasting about it? Like you just said before, as opposed to other people who, you know, people die. We're not built to last. Why is somebody, you know, Carl Reiner died a few months ago, and Rob had a virtual memorial for him. And it might have been 600 people, God knows how many. And we were in a room that was unmuted, so we would be part of a little laughter, you know what I mean? So I saw who was in this room, and there were faces I hadn't seen in a while, and it was Norman Lear but the people who spoke about Carl, well, Rob was the MC, and in no special order was Norman Lear, Billy Crystal, Albert Brooks, Sarah Silverman. Oh, these are people who had worked with him and loved him. And Mel Brooks was the last speaker. Oh, Steve Martin also spoke. And what everybody was saying, yeah, we all know how funny Carl was. We all know what his humor was, but it was all about the humanity. That was at its core. And that's what I'm trying to say with, you know, with these people, or once again, what Shandling did was like, what's it about? You know, so the fact that, let's pretend everybody's talented, okay? Everybody's got a talent, all right? Who do you want to spend your time with? Who touches you in a certain way that you go, I want to know a little bit more. Forget out the work, because let's say you're going to work with, you know, you choice of people to work with. It's what enriches the soul a little bit? What's the takeaway? And I think you're right about, especially now when people have to laugh, a lot of it's cathartic. A lot of it's so welcomed. I have my own problems that you just said about cancel culture, which I think is the death of comedy. And hopefully the pendulum will start to swing back towards the middle, because you know, the politically correct thing, Look, I remember growing up, everybody made fun of everybody else, and then you went to lunch together. You know what I mean? You're fat, you're thin, you're this, you're Jewish, you're this and that. And now everybody's walking on thin ice.
Right. That's why I love comics like Silverman or Jesselnick, or, who aren't afraid to just say the thing.
They just say the thing. They just say it. Say it.
Also, that's that's the whole point of comedy is to be able to touch the thing that no one will look at, no one will talk about, and find that little thing that lets it get into you. Because if we're all walking around like, no, I don't want to think about, talk about, touch that, then we're all at a loss. Humanity is at a loss.
I agree with you. I think society, look, what's so paradoxical about it is it makes things more divisive by saying you can't say certain things. If I was allowed to make fun of you and you make a lot of fun of me and you laugh and I laugh, that makes us closer. We recognize our differences and embrace each other, okay? And it's cool. You know what I mean? If a comic goes to a college and is handed a list of subjects that he's not allowed to talk about or she's not allowed to talk about, you go, well, what the fuck? What am I supposed to say? It's a great unifier. It's not divisive. And they've made it that way by making everybody's walking on eggshells. It's terrible.
I do feel the pendulum. I pray for that, the pendulum to swing back. When you were at SNL, I imagine I'm curious how Lorne dealt with, if you wrote a joke, the censors went, no, you can't say that. Did Lorne step in, or did he let you all fight your own battles? How did that work?
Well, initially, if you wrote something that the censors objected, he would let us fend for ourselves. But if we ran into a roadblock and he believed in it, he would go to bat for us. So there were a lot of incidences where the writers, would deal with the censors, and there was this, and once again, there had to be a certain amount of cunning in order to get certain things on the air. I talk in the book, Michael O'Donoghue, the guy who founded the National Lampoon, I was producing the Weekend Update segment of the show at this time. We had this large woman, Jane Crowley, who was the censor. And she, big overweight woman, ex-nun, dress shield, you know what I'm talking about. And she would sit in the control room, as would any censor, and they'd go during the dress rehearsal, joke by joke, page by page. This was their last shot they had at censoring you before you went on the air live, and it was out there. Michael O'Donoghue had called me one week and he said, listen, what if Weekend Update is brought to you by a product that we make up? I said, sure, go for it. So this particular week he had Don Pardo, the announcer, say, and now Weekend Update brought to you by Pussy Whip, the dessert topping for cats. Well, it was a huge hit. It was really funny. And I wanted to do one. So for the following week in dress rehearsal, I had Pardo say, and now Weekend Update brought to you by Blue Balls, B-L-E-U, Blue Balls, the cheese snack from France. Well, everybody loved it, except one person, Jane Crowley, the door of the control room opens. She comes waddling out. She finds me and she says, Alan, you can't say that when we go on the air. I said, can't say what? She says, you can't say blue balls. And I said, why? And she said, because it has to do with the male genitalia. And I said, Jane, last week you let us say pussy whip, which is clearly the female genitalia. Now this, what kind of sexist organization are you running here? And she said, give me a minute. She goes into the control room, picks up a phone, calls God, I guess, and comes out. She waddles out 10 minutes later, and she says, Alan, in all seriousness, okay, Alan, I gave it a lot of thought, and I've come to the conclusion that because I gave you pussy whip last week, I'll be more than happy to give you blue balls this week. And I just said, Jane, that's not necessary. Just let us say it on TV. We'll call it even, and that's the way it worked, and if she still gave it a hard time, Lorne would have stepped in. But all of us, Frank, and when I wrote Laugh Lions, I called all the writers from back then, and I asked them, tell me a story about the censor. If they all have different censor stories that are in the book. It's a cultural memoir. What was the era like here that I was lucky to be a part of, but this was what was going on around me. So the SNL part was very revolutionary, and but it had to be done in smaller steps. You can do more the fifth show than the first, and more the 20th than you could the fifth.
Yeah, and now, from what I understand, is they slip jokes in at the last minute too, that I'm sure brings some ire down after the fact, which cracks me up under the wire. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the writers for any of those shows these days have it harder than we did, because there are so many shows that are doing topical humor, for example, okay? Whether it be Colbert or John Oliver or Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel. By the time Saturday comes around, you want to do something that isn't reminiscent of something you heard. So I think that to a certain degree, they have to be more clever, and I think they are. And I think to a great extent, television has caught up, with after so many years and so many outlets where you can basically see and hear anything. You're not going to outdazzle anybody. Shocking somebody isn't really going to be the thing. You've got to have another thing going on, okay? Because we've seen it all by now. So for them to make us laugh, boy, they must be doing something special.
Well, that's what I think it must be like writing for a show like Curb Your Enthusiasm, because life is inherently, it's that bedfellow of tragedy and comedy writing this line. But the craziest stuff is funny. And I think that show certainly proves, like, the worst stuff you can find the humor in.
The couple of years that I was on that show as a consulting producer, and I was on one of the episodes, okay? It was... as an actor, Larry has always been that way. Larry has always thought differently than everybody else. And the things that he thought that we also thought, but we thought might be too naughty to talk about, Larry did. And so, we knew even back then that he was on a different plane. He was, and when I appeared on that one episode with Larry, and we were improvising, it was like every phone call I've ever had with him since 1974 when we met. That's who the guy is, and he makes me smile, because he wears his anguish on his sleeve, He's
very. I saw him once at Chateau Marmont, and there is a thing around him, though. He's very charismatic. There's an enigma thing moving with him. So it's not surprising that he stuck with who he was and didn't give a shit about whether the fact people in the audience didn't get his jokes. Because if you watch his old stuff, people are like, wait, what?
Well, it's an often told story, but the 10 minutes or the few months that I was a stand-up comedian, because that's how Lorne ultimately saw me and whatever. After I left the Catskills, I took the jokes they wouldn't buy from me and I made it into a stand-up act for myself. And I got on stage at the Improv in a place called Catch a Rising Star. And let's say there were 20 minutes intervals between comic number one and comic number two, right? If Larry was on at 9 o'clock, and let's say I was on at 9:20, I would still get there at 9 o'clock because Larry back then had this Brillo kind of hair, like Larry Fine from the Three Stooges, these wire rim glasses. He wore this green army fatigue that said L. David above the breast pocket because it was like a National Guard thing. And he'd get on stage at Friday night at the Improvisation, which is a Long Island Jewish crowd. People schlepping in from Huntington or maybe from Jersey, a lot of pastels, a lot of leisure suits, a lot of bouffants, okay? And Larry would get up and he'd look out and he'd say, I feel very comfortable with you tonight. Say this to the audience. Says, in fact, I feel so comfortable, I'm thinking of using the to form of the verb instead of usted. Now, I'm sitting in the back, and laughing because I think it's hilarious. And B, the audience is like this oil painting. They're just looking at this. They don't get it. They don't think it's funny. They're just staring. Now, when a comic hits a roadblock, especially right out of the gate, you veer in a different direction. Not Larry. He just kept going. He'd say, I think a lot of people misuse the to form of the verb. He says, when Brutus stabs Caesar, Caesar says, A2 Brutus? And Brutus says, Caesar, I just stabbed you. If there was ever a time for usted, it's now, okay? I'm laughing, and the audience is just tumbleweed going down the aisles, and then Larry would just go, fuck you, and he'd walk off, and I'd get on at 9:01. So it's the way, and what Larry would do on stage in terms of the audience, his frustrations with them, his intolerance for what he felt was their stupidity. They're legendary. Anything you read or hear about Larry in the early days then, he would do stuff like that. But what he did was, and this is, aside from loving him like a brother, I mean, he's my buddy, he had the conviction of not wanting to yield. He didn't want to compromise. So when he didn't have a pot to pee in, and if he would write a script and a producer would look at it, and let's say, I'm making this part up, but this is an example. If the producer would say, gee, I really want to option this script and offer Larry more money than he ever saw in his life, but here are the changes I would like you to make. I go, Larry, make them. Who cares if it's a red tie or a blue tie? Just make the changes. And Larry stuck to his guns. And there were times where he turned down money that he never saw before. And because he had the conviction of, no, this is the way I see it, and this is the way I want it done. And he brought that to Seinfeld. And then when he had the opportunity for Curb, certainly did it there. So what he did was he waited for the rest of the world to catch up to him.
Yeah, there you go. That's the secret right there. And I don't want to take all your time. I'm loving this conversation, but I do want to get to, before we go, you have a film that you wrote coming out with Billy Crystal and Tiffany Haddish, the Here Today.
It's called Here Today. Yeah. I love it. We had a virtual screening with the cast and crew last week, and I wrote it with. I had told I was a guest on Letterman, and I had told a story, a true story. There was a silent auction for some charity in New York. I can't even remember what it was. I don't know if it was for a disease or for a theater or whatever. And I was the prize, I was a prize. Now and the prize was having lunch with me. Now, I'm used to friends like Larry David, where they'll pay $100,000 to watch him brush his teeth. You know what I mean? Or Tom Hanks will give him $250,000 to see him shave. The day came where I had the prize. I had to go and meet the winner of the silent auction for lunch. So we live in Jersey, drove in, parked the car, toll, go to the restaurant, and I meet this young lady. And I asked her early on, I said, look, I don't want to be indelicate. How much did you pay to have this lunch with me? And she says, 22. And I'm going, Jesus, $2,200. It's not Tom Hanks money, but it's not big. She goes, what do you mean $2,200? Literally $22. The bidding started at $20 and went up in 50-cent increments. Well, now I hate her. And we're eating, and she had ordered a seafood salad, which was as big as the high school I went to. And there's lobsters, and there's big shrimp, and she's eating. And I noticed that all of a sudden the lip is starting to droop, and the eye is getting bigger, but the other eye isn't getting bigger. She's having a reaction to the shellfish. And I'm wondering, at what point does my obligation to the auction winner end? Okay. Long story short, my heart went out to her. I went with her to Lenox Hill Hospital here in New York. She didn't have insurance. I bought her an EpiPen. So what cost her $22 ended up costing me about $900. So I told this story on the Letterman show, and Billy said, why don't we make that a beginning scene of a May-December relationship between an older writer and a younger woman. We wrote a script called Here Today, and it's really funny, but it will really touch your heart. Billy plays an older comedy writer who's starting to get a little bit of dementia, starting to lose his grip on reality. So it's really funny, but once the younger woman sees what's going on with him, she becomes his muse. And he's writing a book about his deceased wife, and he wants to complete it before he runs out of his words. And so there's a lot of heart in it. And it took he and I would say about a year and a half, maybe 2 years to write it. And then it came time, who would play the younger woman? And after we went through a long list of people that were making movies, and Billy said, how about Tiffany Haddish? And I had not heard of her, but I had DVR'd that SNL that week when she had hosted. And I called him back. I said, that's perfect. So we made this movie, and it's all done. And it was supposed to be in theaters this past fall. COVID killed that. Billy directed it, and he did an amazingly good job. And it will make you laugh, and boy, does it really tug at your heart. So now we're at a point where, okay, do you go straight to Netflix, or now that there's a vaccine, do we hold out a little longer, and maybe theaters will open up in 6 months? Because we had the benefit of seeing this movie play before COVID shut everything down in a rough form. Okay, temporary music, and stuff wasn't dubbed and whatever, in a theater, 300 or so people in Pasadena. So we saw a community of people reacting to the movie and laughing and crying at the same time as each other, and you go, this is the way this movie should be seen. So we were spoiled in a way, because we know how it plays to a crowd. So we're going to see when it can come out.
If you can hold on, and I know there's powers much greater than I that make those sorts of decisions, but my vote is hold out, because I have a feeling that when people can, it's going to be a bacchanalia of great excess in all directions. Theaters will be packed, restaurants will be packed, people will be fucking in the streets. It'll be total lunacy. And my God, do I miss going to the movies. And there is something about the communion of sitting in, I know, say what you will about people snacking, being loud, or people talking, but the cacophony of this, the breathing and the shocks and the cries and the feeling like you're one being.
Yeah.
Taking this in, there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it. It's absolutely right. And everybody's eyes are forward, looking forward on the same images on a screen. And even the distraction of somebody saying, "Oh yeah, I want it with mustard," it's part of the thing. But you're absolutely right. It's so much better than sitting at home. With this book, I had a whole book tour scheduled. So Lewis Black was to interview me in front of 900 people at the 92nd Street Y. Larry David and I were supposed to be in some theater in conversation in LA. And when that all went away, okay, so to promote the book, aside from the talk shows and the podcast and Mark Maron and all of that, which were all great, to make up the 900 people who would be at the 92nd Street Y, I got to do 4 or 5 virtual Jewish community centers, okay? So I see them on the screen, and I have them unmute about 15 people, so there's at least some laughter, so I'm not just telling stuff that goes into the ether. But yeah. I'll see, this one's got a dog. Okay. There was a woman about 2-3 weeks ago, while I was talking, she was knitting. Okay. So, and it's just what we get. But in the same way, there's an intimacy to it now. It's a little bit more casual. But for a thing like a movie like this, no, it has to be seen by a bunch of people. So there are powers greater than me. Fred Bernstein, who's a wonderful, wonderful producer. I spoke to him the other day, and that's the plan. And I'm hoping that when theaters do open up, that's the way it's going to go.
That's great. And everyone read all of Alan. And that's the other thing, is you've written so many books. I don't know where you find the time, but my God, gobs of books, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will put information about you on heyhumanpodcast.com, links to everything. I want to put there's a YouTube video of you on David Letterman doing the boxer.
Okay, sure, go for it.
From Schumann. Yeah, it's so funny, so very funny, and just wonderful. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. So,
it's my pleasure. You. No, you're really fun to talk to, Susan, and hopefully we'll meet each other in person someday.
I would love that. That would be great. We could share some wine and make fun of Russ.
Absolutely. We'll tear Russ Woody apart. Okay, so
it's AlanZweibel.com is your website, yes?
AlanZweibel.com, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure, Susan. Take care.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.